Hi, Dog. I was just wondering, for this tournament, are there any specific deck types that maybe you're like really worried about facing off against, or that you think are really going to be kind of dominant for this tournament?
Yeah, big spell mages. There's two big spell mages in my group, and that's not a very good matchup for my lineup. I think that'll probably be one of the best performing decks in the tournament. But yeah, that's probably the one I'm most scared to play against. Rogue lineups also are bad for me, but I usually just ban the rogue anyways. But big spell mage will probably be one of the top notch decks right now, I would say.
Hi there. My name is Nick from Inven. We've been talking to some of the other players about the Summer Championship, and some of them said that they would be bringing a Quest Priest and a Quest Warrior. I'm sorry, a Quest Warrior and a Control Priest. Can you give a little of your own insight on why you think those may be good decks to play, or maybe a bad decks to play?
So Control Priest and Quest Warrior, right?
Yeah.
So the problem with Quest Warrior is that it's very, very okay. So it's like a really good anti-aggro deck, but it's not very good against some of the best decks right now. And the best decks are like Even Warlock and Taunt Druid, but it is good against like the second tier best decks, or I guess the other side of the best decks, which is like Odd Paladin and Even Shaman. So it just depends what you expect. The problem with Quest Warrior and Conquest is that you can get blown out pretty easily. Cube is a card that just destroys you. So if you play against like a Recruit Hunter, Even Warlock, or Taunt Druid lineup, you're in trouble. On the flip side of that, though, if you play against like an Odd Paladin, you just destroy them. But the lineup with Quest Warrior and Control Priest makes sense together because Control Priest is kind of the same thing. You're going to be banning out Druid because you can't really beat Hadronox, and they have too much armor gain to beat. So usually ban out that class, which is helpful for the Warrior also. And it's really anti-aggro as well. So you'd be beating token decks like Token Druid and Odd Paladin and Even Shaman. So it kind of goes into the like what you expect people to bring camp. If you expect a ton of aggro, then it's a really good bring. But Conquest is kind of tricky because if you bring one bad deck and you can't get a win with it, or it just gets like punished really hard because it's too anti-aggro, and you play against a control lineup, it's just really bad. So that's why I didn't bring it, but it's a lineup choice, right? It's not bad.
How do you prepare for the upcoming tournament?
So for the tournament, I just talk to my teammate a lot. I usually just kind of talk to everyone because I'm only one person and I can't test everything myself. So kind of delegate work a little bit, but also just get people's opinion on things. Myself as a player, I don't really think I need that much practice within the deck itself, but whenever I'm preparing decks is when I need the most practice because I played Hearthstone enough to where I'm not going to be making like too many simple mistakes, or I know how to play almost every deck because I've streamed so much and because I play off-meta decks, and I don't know, a lot of things are intuitive to me. But when coming up with lineups and tech cards and things like that, that's the main part of Hearthstone that's like hard. The actual gameplay isn't that hard most of the time. People can count the file math, you can count to 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that stuff's not that hard, but deck preparation and stuff like that is pretty difficult for pro players.
All right. So Ford asked, how confident are you going into the event?
So my chances of getting out of groups aren't too great. I'm like probably 45% to get out of groups. I'm pretty favored in my first matchup, like probably 53, 55%. And then my second matchup is going to be bad regardless. If I play against the guy who has Miracle Rogue and Big Spell Mage, I have a really low win rate against him. But the good thing is it's GSL groups, so maybe I'll play the first guy twice. And 45% isn't terrible. And, if you count in player skill or people like mess up or something because they're not too used to competing in tournaments, that might help me a little bit more. But, yeah, I mean, just kind of low roll the groups a little bit. Not too big of a deal. Just got to high roll the actual draw.
So, not too long ago we had that test gray main patch, and it affected its own tournament, and there's some criticism with the way or the speed at how Blizzard responded to all of that. What were your thoughts on that whole patch situation?
They actually patched it faster than they normally do, which was still too slow, obviously. But yeah, the nerfs were actually good this time around. They did a good job. I wish it was a little bit faster, but they have a lot of tournaments lined up, and they don't really want to mess with that. What they really should do is just get a test server and be more okay with changing things. That way, people can, or a tournament server, not a test server rather. That way people, if they submit it already, they don't have to worry about it. I think that's probably the big issue. I wish there was a little bit more change in Hearthstone because things do get stale pretty quickly. Buffing cards isn't really necessary, but nerfing cards definitely is. The meta right now is pretty okay though. I think it needs a little bit more cards, so it'd be a little more exciting. But yeah, I mean, the way they handled that patch was okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in how you talked about the preparation, and you said the skill of the game, like isn't that hard. Most people can count to 5. On average, how many decks do you actually have to have in your mind and have a intimate knowledge of? Like, how many decks do you really have to be aware of, or how does a pro player put that into like a quantifiable number? If you were to try to really explain, oh, you have only prepared for 6 decks, that's not nearly enough. Can you kind of give us a sense of that?
Yeah, so it just depends on the type of tournament, but you need to kind of know every deck. For a tournament like this, it helps especially to know really off-meta decks, just because you have such a knowledge and with Conquest especially, there's like targeting, because if they can't get a win with a deck, they lose, right? So if you bring like a really off-meta deck like Exodia Mage or something, and just make an OTK lineup that just punishes any anti-aggro lineup, you can win. But in tournaments like Swiss, like for prelims, for example, this is champs, but in prelims there's like 64 people usually or more. You can't really go with the off-meta stuff too much because everyone usually just brings the best decks. So it really just depends on the type of tournament. In smaller tournaments, it's a lot easier to go for kind of a crazy lineup and for it to work. But in the bigger tournaments where you kind of expect people to bring certain things, it doesn't really help, I guess. Like, I just brought anti-aggro because everyone, like, the best decks were aggro for prelims. But yeah, there's a lot of decks out there, and there are a lot of bad decks out there, and I know most of all the bad decks for sure. But you don't need to know too much, but you need to know enough. Like, I think every class has about like 3 archetypes. Some have more. And it's kind of gets kind of convoluted whenever you start naming the classes also, right? Like there's like Recruit Hunter, but at the same time there's like Recruit Hunter with cubes, and that actually changes so much of a percentage in the matchups. Like Shutterwalk Shaman, for instance, the matchup against Odd Paladin is pretty bad with the Kelseth version, but whenever you add in double Pyromancer, suddenly things change. Suddenly you get like plus 10% in that matchup. So things change a lot based on what you add as well, and naming decks kind of becomes convoluted at a certain point because, things become like more mid-range or more control, and it becomes kind of weird.
What was the process of choosing the best possible card for each deck that you're going to bring to the tournament?
So I just made a spreadsheet of what I expected people to bring and the number. That's usually what you do for Swiss tournaments as well. And then you can add a percentage based on what you think the card will change. So like maybe each Pyromancer changes the percentage for Odd Paladin, like 5% or something. So you just take 5% from that. But obviously it hurts other matchups. So maybe you take a little bit away from the Recruit Hunter matchup or something. And you kind of just try to balance all these numbers in your head. That's how I choose tech cards most of the time. You got to make sure they're necessary because whenever you add in a card, you're taking away another card, which probably helps in other matchups. So you have to make sure that you're not hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself. And it's just about balancing the percentages to make it favorable for you within the Conquest lineup.
So the next question's from Ford James. He's asking, you're the only player from the Americas bringing Priest, and it's a combo archetype rather than control. Why have you opted for the combo version, and why do you think nobody else has?
I kind of expected one other person to bring combo Priest, but I guess not. I guess they didn't. I wanted the combo version because I wasn't going to ban Taunt Druid. My lineup's like okay against it. It's not great, but I got like 50-50s. And combo Priest does really well against Taunt Druid. It does well against the aggro decks. It beats even Shaman despite what stats say because Dustbreaker just blows them out. The stats on combo Priest were also pretty bad on HS Replay and Vicious Syndicate and a lot of the sites people use because there's not enough data on it. On those off-meta decks, people don't really know the win rates of it because people are either playing the deck really poorly or because there's just not enough people playing the deck. So I kind of just had to make my own stats for it, and yeah, it had good stats for what I wanted. and I think I miscalculated the Warlock matchup. But other than that, like, it's fine against most aggro decks. It's fine against Recruit Hunter. It's really good against Druid, and I wasn't really planning on banning Druid. It has really bad matchups against Rogue. I'm banning Rogue, so it's fine. Yeah, it was a good deck. I actually played in a qualifier like yesterday, 2 days ago, for HCT Tokyo, and I went 8-1 with my lineup, which is the same as Conquest. So yeah, I qualified for that with the same lineup. Seems good.
So you play on Twitch a lot and you have a virtual audience there. Is it a big difference when you're playing in a tournament like this and you have like the actual audience there? Does that impact the way you play at all?
When I first started competing in tournaments, it definitely did. Even without an audience, like my first tournament, I had the jitters and it was awful, and I played poorly. But you know, it's just kind of an experience thing. Once you get into enough tournaments with a live audience, it doesn't really affect you. And I've been in enough. The first few times where there was a live audience or a big stage, I was nervous and it was hard to play. But yeah, now it's not too bad. It doesn't affect me.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the way you speak about competitive Hearthstone as someone who doesn't like numbers and doesn't like statistics. You know, it's just fascinating that is the reality of a pro player. So I want to ask you, when's the last time that you've been really impressed by someone's play, or that you've been really impressed by what someone did in the game? Or is that such a rare thing for you that, you know, it doesn't happen very often?
So within the game, maybe I'm neglecting the game skill a little bit too much, but it's really, really hard to make the right decision every single game. And that comes with like not just practicing specific things, but with playing Hearthstone a lot. I mean, there's so many decision trees. Like if you use one thing, like the way you think of it, you try to think like 3 or 4 turns ahead, right? And if you think 1 turn ahead, and then you think another turn ahead, suddenly things start branching. Like I use this card, and then I use the other cards, and then they keep branching into like, you know, instead of 1 choice, I have 2 choices, and then 2 choices into 4, and then 4 into, you know, it just gets exponentially like higher, or multiplicatively higher. So yeah, it just I don't know, it gets a little crazy. Someone impressing me with their play though, I'm not really impressed by single plays because after a certain point you kind of see everything, right? Like they freeze your minion, you silence it, you go face. That's not very impressive. They have a defile clear. Yeah, I saw that in time. It's fine. It's more the consistency that people play or make right decisions. Whenever people make hand reads, stuff like that, it's impressive because you can kind of tell when people make suboptimal plays just because they think they have something else. They think their opponent has something in hand. So stuff like that is what is impressive to me. Consistency and hand reading, I guess.
What is your favorite Witchwood card, and which do you think should be modified because it is too strong or too weak?
My favorite Witchwood card is probably, I guess, Hagatha right now. It's pretty cool. It's balanced for the most part. You kind of have to be careful with it whenever you're playing Shutterwalk because you might overdraw your hand and it gives you a lot of value. The effect's not too strong like other Death Knights, so it's probably my favorite card right now. My least favorite card is probably Shutterwalk, actually, because I think it's going to be a problem later. OTK decks are fun, but OTK decks that rely on one card aren't too much fun. And, I mean, it does kind of rely on that one card. Back in the day, we used to have cool combo decks like, Leroy Power Faceless decks, and you could stop that with a taunt, or even any Fin you could stop with a taunt. But decks where you can't really interact with, I don't really like. So I think Shutterwalk's going to be a problem in the future.
All right, so a question from Ford. You're definitely one of the veterans out of all the players that have qualified for this event. Do you think your experience at the top of the Hearthstone scene for multiple years will help against some of the newer players?
Yeah, so nowadays it's actually pretty easy to make a decent lineup because there's so many stats out there. You just go to a website and it'll almost make the deck list for you. So lineup-wise, it doesn't really help me that much aside from the preparation I put in myself and try to get an edge with. But with actual gameplay, yeah, my experience will definitely help me there, especially people who get nervous on stage. I mean, that's a big deal for newer players. As I said, I got nervous before. So if it's their first time on stage, they're definitely going to feel the jitters. But yeah, I mean, I'm confident in my play. I'm not really sure how they are. I have to see and wait until they play and see if they, make any mistakes or anything like that. But I think it'll help me. I mean, I'm pretty confident in my abilities. So.
What mistakes from the previous tournament did you learn, and how did you compensate to make your deck stronger for the upcoming tournament?
So I made the mistake of bringing Odd Warrior last time in the last tournament. It was NA prelims. I kind of got lucky in the fact that I played against Muzzy, and he was the only person who brought Token Druid, but my decks were very good against Token Druid. So it was mostly just a bad deck choice. It's really hard whenever you're trying to bring something a little bit different because not everything is accounted for. There's not enough stats on the certain deck or something like that. You have to make up the stats yourself, and you can't really create a big enough sample size to make it relevant. So it's really hard to test. To fix the issue, like the bad deck was the Odd Warrior. I just started to play more. I tested as much as I could, especially with the combo priest. It's a little bit of an off meta pick. But I made sure that the matchups I thought were good, and stuff like that. So just playing more. That was how I fixed the issue.
All right. So we have a few more questions. So let's ask Ford's first. Ford's asking, what are your thoughts on the current state of competitive Hearthstone?
The current state of competitive Hearthstone. I think there are too many tournaments right now. They're not relevant enough. People don't really care. Viewership's kind of down and just in general, but I mean that's just because the expansion is bad. But also just viewership for tournaments in general is down, which isn't very good. I think that comes from there being too many tournaments, not enough really big relevant tournaments that are like fun. So I don't really like that aspect. But on the other hand, it gives a lot of new players opportunities. There's a lot of tour stops. I don't know. It's kind of hard to gauge because especially that there's so many tour stops in different like countries and stuff like that. It costs a lot of money for teams to fly, players out, and how worth it is it for those players to actually compete in those tournaments if there's not enough viewership for exposure, stuff like that. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I just kind of play. Yeah, it's okay right now. I guess it's been better for sure. Blizzard's trying pretty hard to push things, but I'm not really sure if the direction is right.
How do you feel about all these odd and even decks in general? Do you think this mechanic of this kind of build around this one card and get this big bonus, like with these odd and even decks, is that good for the game? Is it a fun thing, or is it maybe bad? Especially going forward, we're gonna have these cards for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to gauge that as well. Like, it's good to have like deck limiting restrictions because that makes deck building kind of fun, but it's bad whenever the deck builds itself. And the issue with that is that there aren't at a certain point there aren't enough cards to play with, right? Like, if you look at other card games like Magic, they have like so many sets in at a time, and Hearthstone doesn't have that many. I feel like this is the first set of the rotation, so there's only like 4 sets out plus a base set, and then there'll be 5, and then there'll be 6, and then it'll reset again. I think Hearthstone probably needs to have 6 sets. But with odd and even decks, yeah, I kind of like the deck limiting restriction. The Paladin one's a little bit too strong, just because like you're really focused on that hero power, which I mean I guess that's the point of odd and even decks, right? But I think the deck limiting restriction thing is kind of fun and it's good. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's not one specific card that's making it hard or making it bad. Like I don't like when one specific card carries a deck. The Death Knights, I didn't really like that much, especially like the Death Knights that carry the deck, like Blood Reaver Gul'dan or Frostlich Jaina, because whenever you have those cards in, it's just a matter of who draws it first, mostly.
Yeah, so last question from me. Do you think that a supercomputer, maybe something similar to Deep Blue in chess, or something just made for Hearthstone, do you think that in theory that supercomputer could be the best Hearthstone player of all time and would almost always have the highest win percentage if someone really set out and made such a computer?
If it was open deck lists, yeah, I think it could. because you can account for almost everything, and you should have a good idea. Yeah. I mean, it should if it was a supercomputer. If it was awesome, if it was like amazing. Yeah, it should be able to, especially in the open deck list format. Yeah, why not? It's fine.
Okay.
I don't really know how they would do it with like Heroes of the Storm or anything like that. Like that seems nearly impossible. But yeah, Hearthstone probably. I mean, Go is solved, so it's fine.
All right, cool. Thanks.
In each of the decks you are bringing to the tournament, what is your favorite combo from the Witchwood decks?
What's my favorite combo from the Witchwood decks?
Yeah, the ones that you're bringing to the tournament.
The ones that I'm bringing to the tournament. I mean, the combo priest that I have is probably my favorite. I mean, I brought Shudderwalk Shaman, but that one's pretty standard. I like that almost everyone who brought Shudderwalk Shaman in this tournament, I think there's only one, brought Pyromancer. But yeah, my favorite combo, probably the combo priest. It's really nice because you get like Shadow Visions and you can push a lot of damage with Divine Spirit and her fire. The deck people don't really know how to play against, so that's like a huge advantage, right? Like if they don't have that much experience against the deck, then they don't really know how to play against it. So yeah, probably the combo priest is my favorite combo.
Alright, so before we close this off, Dog, do you have a closing statement?
No, thank you guys so much for interviewing me and letting me talk. It's nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day. Great day.
Good luck.